to do is talk about my experience as a veterinary scientist, and especially with regard to One Health topics, especially emerging diseases. So I'll talk about my veterinary training just as an example of a career as a veterinary scientist, as well as then we'll talk about emerging diseases, where they're coming from, some examples, and how we connect that to One Health exactly. So I know in this seminar series you've been talking about veterinary careers. You've talked about, different veterinarians come in and talk about private practice, equine practice. I think that was that last week, and then there's shelter medicine as well. Of course, there's all these other disciplines and areas in veterinary medicine. I'm going to be primarily talking about teaching and research. This is the area that I went into after going into veterinary school. And so my interest was looking at preventing and solving health problems that affect animals and humans. And I was also interested in trying to develop ways to reduce or eliminate the threat of disease. And so that's what I was interested in, and that's where a lot of veterinarians will do as a career choice after getting done with veterinary school. But to start, some things that I would recommend along the way, this is something that you're interested in doing, is to think about mentors, role models that you have interacted with and that you would think would be a good, someone to follow, someone to ask questions about their career, what their careers are. I was lucky. My dad is a veterinarian. He's also a researcher, and so he was a great role model for me. I kind of happened to be born into a family of a role model. And so he provided an example to me on what he did, what exactly his day-to-day job was as a veterinary scientist. And so I kind of followed in his footsteps. Some other mentors that I had as I was developing my career and planning on going into veterinary school was mentors like Dr. Lackey, where I shadowed him and volunteered in his clinic. And got the experience of clinical practice. I think that's always a good experience, a good way to find out if this is a career that you want to take part of. And then also along the path, I was also quite involved with 4-H, and because my brother and I, we raised sheep and showed them, learn how to work with animals, feed them, take care of them, treat them if needed. So that was a really great experience for me to again, find out this is really what I want to do. Do I want to work with animals as I did with my brother? This is where I kind of fell in love with horses and working with horses, and this sort of launched me in wanting to definitely go into veterinary school because I rode horses, I worked with them at a very young age, and also worked with 4-H, and they had a veterinary science program in 4-H. I was also involved with horse judging, horseback riding, so I really got involved in that. And all that was a great thing for me. Even doing the sheep judging, kind of in the end, it sort of benefited me because my brother, he and I received a 4-year scholarship with the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. I mean, that wasn't in the plan, but, that kind of worked out with that experience of working with sheep and horses. Also along the path was being involved, especially with 4-H, with community projects like providing horse rides for special needs kids and that kind of thing. And I think that's also very important, especially as you're applying for veterinary school. Academic preparation is the required first day of school picture, that your parents do. Well, I got mine here as well. I think this is the first day I've had my car as well, so that's very exciting. Anyway, so again, academic preparation was very important, and I knew that was something that I needed to be prepared for, especially going into college and being able to do well grade-wise in college, to be competitive to get into veterinary school. So I always had that long-distance goal in mind, and so I really worked really hard in high school and junior high, especially in the sciences and math. Which of course required, science fair projects. Here I am handling a mouse of all things with the old cardboard maze experiment. So little did I know that even in high school when I was doing this, very simple mouse project, that this kind of experience in handling mice of all things would benefit me later in research. So you never know what your experiences are going to lend you later on, benefit you later on. And then also, as I mentioned, I did volunteer with Dr. Lackey. I worked in several private practices when I was in junior high and high school, but even in college I did some volunteering to get some experience. I worked in an ambulatory clinic with Dr. Allen. That was also a new experience for me. How do you work a practice and driving around to different houses and working with dogs and cats. I also worked on veterinary research projects at A&M. I grew up at College Station, so I was kind of born and raised an Aggie in a way. So I got to know Dr. Womack and doing some research projects during the summer. And again, that was kind of an interesting experience to get an idea of what goes on in the lab exactly. And then even I did something that was actually non-animal health related, being all things a receptionist answering the phone. I didn't even think that that would really benefit you career-wise, but it did. It did help develop my communication skills and talking on the phone and working on a computer and working with different types of people. And so all those things kind of lend themselves to developing your skill set sort of thing. Not to mention letters of recommendation. After volunteering for them, of course, you have to submit a letter of recommendations for your application, so they were really wonderful references for me. So you sort of are building on all these experiences. Finally got into vet school. I got into undergraduate, I say now. I was an animal science major. I worked really hard to get done with my prerequisites ahead of time because I figured I'd probably have to apply a couple of times. Well, thankfully, I got done with my prerequisites by my junior year in animal science, and actually they accepted me into vet school, so I got in 1 year early, which was nice. But it did take some sacrifice. I spent my life in Evans Library pretty much most of the time, working hard at my classes. But I did manage to go to a couple football games along the way. So it was a great experience, but I was definitely determined to get into vet school, to work really hard on my courses, and to be competitive because it's a tough competition to try to get into if there's only 120 slots in my case. So I was very committed to it early on. So here I am working with one of the cases in vet school, and of course here's one of the I think this is probably embryology class or maybe pathology class where we worked 4 years in veterinary medicine. I got my degree from Texas A&M, and then after I got done with my veterinary degree, I was really interested in equine medicine and surgery, so I wanted to continue doing that experience. And so I decided to do a large animal internship, of all places, Prince Edward Island, which is way up here in Canada. I'd always been way down here in landlocked Texas, so it was kind of a big move for me, but it was a great move for me. I was a little homesick, frankly, because the only way you could get onto that island was by a boat. So I was literally on an island. You could only get there by boat. So that was kind of a little bit of a shock to the system, but it was certainly worth it because I learned how to become independent. I really formed great friendships with colleagues there. I learned all sorts of different things that was a little bit different than what I was used to in Texas, which was good. So it expanded my horizon. During the internships, generally, those are rather broad. So the internship, which is usually 1 year in this case, involved large animal surgery, large animal internal medicine, and reproduction. So for 1 year, I was rotating through the clinic at Atlantic Veterinary College, getting experience in medicine, surgery, and reproduction in cattle and horses primarily. So, this is where I got to learn about dairy cattle. I was kind of scared of cows because I was used to big cows trying to kill you, but dairy cows are much, much nicer. And then I also learned about standard bred horses. This is something I was used to quarter horses, standard bred horses, totally different group of athletes, very tough horses. And so it was a really great experience. Here I am. I was traveling up to ABC in my Jetta, my U-Haul that my mom and I drove all the way up there. So it was quite a drive, but we made it along with my cat, Stuart. So anyways, great experience, 1 year. So after that, I decided, okay, I want to continue on getting more experience, especially with equine. Again, that's my first love, always will be. So I decided to do a large animal residency at the University of Minnesota. That's in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so that's a 3-year program. You probably heard Dr. Davis talk about the different residencies, surgery, there's medicine, there's reproduction. In my case, and in her case, she and I both did surgery residencies. And so, of course, that focuses on horses, cattle, sheep, pigs, any kind of surgical procedure on those. And that's a 3-year program. So here I am with a little calf that we did some surgery. And so that, again, great experience. The other great experience about doing this residency was that I had the experience of writing a scientific research article, and it was actually peer-reviewed. It was accepted. It was very exciting because it was a lot of work. It was basically involving a nylon wound dressing of all things. And actually, I was able to even get an award from the American College of Veterinary Surgeons for this paper that I had written. So, I mean, it was all a great thing. And so all this is sort of, I'm accumulating all this experience. I'm learning how to write a paper of all things, which would, again, benefit me later on as I continue on my research career. From there, I decided I wanted to stay in academia. I wanted to sort of no longer kind of follow the clinics, but kind of get into more basic science like immunology. And so I decided to do a PhD at Cornell University on immunology. And it was kind of an interesting situation for me because I joined a lab that studied early equine pregnancy. Well, horses, of course, my love. Immunology, that's what I was interested in studying. And it involved some surgical procedure as well for my research study. So I got to use my surgical skills on horses and learn about immunology. And in this case, it's comparative medicine, looking at early equine pregnancy as a model for human pregnancy. So here, it's getting a little bit closer to the One Health topic of comparative medicine in this case. So there was a research herd of horses that we bred, and we took care of the foals, we took care of the mares and stallions, we did breeding. So it was a very active program. So because these horses are seasonal breeders, the PhD took a little longer than usual, but overall, it was a really wonderful experience. Again, developing friendships and colleagues along the way. From there, I did a postdoc at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas. They have a Galveston National Lab where they study a lot of high pathogen types of pathogens of organisms that are of relevance to human health. Of course, a lot of these human health pathogens that are high consequences are often zoonotic. A lot of them are also arboviruses, which are viruses that are transmitted by either mosquitoes or tick or some other vector. And so I was interested in vector-borne viruses. In this case, I joined a lab that studied viruses that affect horses as well as humans. So I was able to use my immunology experience for my PhD to study the immune response of horses to arboviruses that were important in transmitting those viruses to humans. So as part of a transmission cycle, but because they needed an expert in immunology in horses in particular, that was me. I had these experiences as I've gone along in my career. Not without any plans or anything that I had really knew this was going to happen, that they were looking for someone like me. And so, as I said, as you're going through your career, you're going to be picking up these things. And one of these days, someone's going to say, hey, I want someone with your type of experience to fill this job. So it was just, you know, it was kind of a matter of, I guess, luck that I was able to find this really wonderful lab and start my career as an assistant professor before coming to Kansas State. So can anyone name an arbovirus for me? Arbovirus, a virus that's transmitted by a mosquito.
Zika.
Zika. Yeah, there you go. Very good. So it's not the band arbovirus. Apparently when I was looking at arboviruses, like a picture, this came up. So it's not a band, so no. But this is a whole list of several arboviruses that are important for human health. The ones in red are the ones that I was able to study while I was at the Galveston National Lab. Also, you can see the equine encephalitis viruses. Those are the ones that I was especially interested in because they were equine associated. So, yeah, you got Zika right there. It is. Again. So here I'm at K-State Olathe. I'm a research assistant professor. I'm also a faculty advisor for the Veterinary Biomedical Science Master's graduate program. So I work with a lot of students in their projects that are primarily connected to the animal health industry. And as you probably already know, the K-State Olathe campus is located in this really rich environment of in the animal health corridor where we have lots of national leaders in animal health and nutrition industries, which you can see all targeted right around Kansas City. So, so of course, a lot of these companies account for a lot of the sales of local health market, and there's several of the companies that are located in this area. And so, of course, K-State Olathe is right in the middle of them. So we're in a really great location to help those industries, help the employees and projects related to what they're doing. And of course, the National Bio and Agro Biodefense facility is being built in Manhattan. That's a really important facility that's going to be studying high consequence animal diseases. And so it's anticipated to open in 2022. It's going to be focused on animal diseases like foot and mouth disease, for example. That's a really important, impactful type of disease that could be very important and impact our economy if it ever struck here. So we want to be prepared for those kinds of infections. And so K-State Olathe is in a nice location that can help bridge the industries with what might be going on in Manhattan, like this biodefense facility. So here's my career map. Again, I had no idea when I graduated from vet school that I would end up going to all these different institutions. But I have, and those have all been really wonderful experiences that I've gotten to know people, I've gotten to know places and their capabilities. Collaboration is very important, especially as a veterinary research scientist. And through meetings, whether I visited or actually lived there, I've gone to several of the veterinary colleges in the United States. I know that was talked about in some other lectures that there's at least 28 veterinary colleges or so. So with my career, I've had the really wonderful experience of going to some of these veterinary colleges, whether present at meetings or to collaborate or to actually live there and work. So this is all a really nice network of scientists across the board and beyond in other countries. So really wonderful career. So this is basically my career path in a way, not that it was intentional after I graduated from vet school, but I started with clinics and then I went into some basic science like immunology. And then I've been able to come back around to actually apply what I've learned. I've worked in the clinics. I've seen diseases in the clinics. I've seen how the immune system impacts the infectious diseases, for example. And now, and then I've actually been able to apply what I've learned to even study vaccines and how to prevent some of those infectious diseases. So one thing is not all career paths are the same. I didn't know when I graduated from vet school that this is what I was going to do. I just sort of learned along the way, and you're going to learn along the way as well. Your career path is going to be very different than mine. But it's what draws you, and you're going to be picking up all these skills and experiences and relationships along the way, and that's going to carry you through to the future sort of thing. So you never know when, working with mice in high school that you would actually be able to you'd be doing that even more so as a research scientist in a basic laboratory, for example. So, where will your path take you or lead you? You just continue to find a good mentor. See what they're doing. If there's a particular mentor and you enjoy you're interested in what they're doing, talk to them, ask them questions, see if you can follow them. By the way, you can have more than one mentor. You can have 2 mentors, you can have 3 mentors. So don't limit yourself to one mentor or 2 mentors. So ask questions. A lot of times they're more than willing to help you along, answer questions, give you advice. Also work hard. It does pay off. I know it's kind of, you want to go out and do lots of social things, and that's fine too. It's just finding that balance because all that hard work is going to pay off in the long run for sure. And then what was the other thing I was going to tell you is just continue to pursue your dreams and carry them with you, and you will do well, and your path is going to open up wide as well. So the sky's the limit in what you want to do. So let's any questions on that career as far as my career choice as a veterinary scientist. So let's talk about emerging diseases and One Health. So who can tell me, can explain to me what One Health is? Have you had One Health in any of your classes or talked about it in any of your classes? Do you have anyone? It's a really fun topic, I think, because it's looking at this relationship between animals and humans and the environment. And there's a lot of interaction between these 3, the triad of One Health, sometimes is what you'll hear it called. So it's really this complex interrelationship between humans and animals, humans and the environment, and animals in the environment. And a lot of it is actually overlapped. I mean, it almost looks like there's only one direct relationship. Actually, it's all converged and overlap across each other. It's really an integrated effort of multiple disciplines, working locally, nationally, and globally to attain optimal health for people, animals, and the environment. So because there's these interactions, the idea is to try to improve each of these aspects of One Health and what we do. And so again, these 3 make up the One Health triad, and the health of each affects one another is the basic idea of One Health. Why do you think it's important to understand One Health? Why do you think it's important to understand those relationships against those 3, animal, human, environment? Any ideas? So if we understand those relationships, then we can improve and impact each other, basically. How can this be applied? You can look at One Health regarding zoonotic diseases, or you can look at it in how a natural or built environment affects a human or animal health, or vice versa. You can think of it in terms of comparative medicine, how human diseases and some animal diseases almost look exactly the same. You can look at it with regard to food safety and security. That can also be a One Health topic as well. But today we're going to be talking about zoonotic diseases. If you talk about One Health, there's the triad. This is a little bit more complicated view of what One Health looks like exactly, but some describe it as an umbrella of One Health. So under the umbrella, you have all these different fields of science like health economics, molecular microbiology, human medicine, public health, veterinary medicine, ecology. It encompasses all those things, and then you can look at it at different levels at either the individual, the population, or the ecosystem. And then underneath that, you have maybe these 2 major categories, zoonotic infections and comparative medicine, translational medicine. And within those 2 buckets, you can see all the different aspects of zoonotic disease, interventions, different types of infections that go on. Some additional resources that I provided to you in those copies that if you want to investigate One Health even further, I think these are really great resources to look into. This is a One Health Kansas, One Health Kansas website that provides lots of interesting videos that you can view and some other things. It doesn't actually update events, but a lot of the videos are active and very interesting if you're interested in rabies virus, for example. There's a really great couple of videos involving rabies virus if you're interested in studying that. The other one is ProMed. ProMed's kind of a neat listserv that basically will send you updates when an infectious disease outbreak is occurring around the world. I mean, maybe not everybody wants to learn about that, but sometimes it's nice to know what's going on around the world. What kind of diseases are out there exactly? When are they happening? Why are they happening? What's causing them? And so this listserv, you can break it down into animal disease or veterinary diseases, plant diseases, or human diseases, and it'll give you either all the details or just a weekly synopsis, a little summary of what's going on, what kind of outbreaks have occurred, sort of thing. So that's kind of an interesting website. The other one is called Health Map, and basically it brings in all the reports from around the world, and it basically maps it out, and you can actually go in and look at particular diseases. You can look at what's going on, what kind of outbreaks are occurring around you, what outbreaks are occurring around Africa. Where are these hot spots of disease outbreaks occurring around the world real time, basically. So that's pretty neat. And then I think the last one is the One Health Initiative. They've got a lot of nice resources if you want to look into that. The One Health Day was associated with the One Health Initiative. That's going to be an annual event, I'm supposing probably in November each year. And they also have journals that you can access regarding One Health topics. So it's pretty cool. So look that one up. So going back to this umbrella of One Health, you already saw that. Today we're going to be talking about zoonotic infections, in particular under the One Health umbrella. So can anyone tell me what zoonotic infection is? What is a zoonotic infection? Zoo sort of gives you a clue. What's that? Is it like infections that happen in zoos? And then zoo is sort of indicate animals, generally speaking. So maybe infections associated with animals that are transmitted to humans, basically. So they can be any infection that can be transmitted, sometimes even by a mosquito or another kind of vector from non-human animals, either wild or domestic animals to humans. So it's the transmission of disease from animals to humans, which may or may not involve a mosquito vector or a tick vector or that kind of thing. And so today we're going to be primarily focusing on zoonotic diseases associated with wild animals. So what do you think are emerging infectious diseases? Emerging infectious diseases versus non-emerging infectious diseases. I don't know. These are diseases that just kind of just show up, right? They come out of the blue. They all of a sudden appear out of nowhere in a population. No explanation. It's just an emerging infectious disease. So we're going to talk about some of these questions. How do emerging infectious diseases affect humans? Where do emerging infectious diseases come from? What are some examples of recent emerging infectious diseases associated with animals? How do emerging infectious diseases affect the nation economically? What are the emerging infectious diseases increasing or decreasing? What are the hot spots of emerging infectious diseases and why? How does the environment affect the emergence of infectious diseases? And what are ways to control these diseases when we talk about One Health, remember, animal, human, environment? So the impact of infectious diseases on human health, we know that infectious diseases are an important cause of death. According to the WHO, we have at least about 15 million deaths associated with emerging diseases or infectious diseases, some of which are emerging infectious diseases. So of the 1,415 pathogens out there known to affect humans, how many do you think are actually zoonotic? Who says A? Who says B? And who says C? B. Excellent. Good job. I think you guys got that. So most of you guys got this. Okay, so of the zoonotic emerging infectious diseases, which ones of them are caused by wildlife origin? So meaning not domestic animals, but animals that are in the wild. 25%, 58%, 72%. You guys have this. That's right, 72%. You guys study this before. I mean, you guys are So, given what we know about these emerging infectious diseases, these zoonotic ones can have a lot of profound effects in public health. One example is the Nipah virus. This virus originated from flying foxes, or fruit bats, basically, in Malaysia in 1999, and it caused really high case fatality rates in humans due to severe inflammation of the brain, or the CNS, causing encephalitis. And so that's just one example. So it originated from a bat. You can see the distribution of where these bats are found relative to where the outbreaks occurred of Nipah virus infection. So it was a pretty bad disease. A related one besides Nipah is the Hendra virus, which is a very closely related one to Nipah virus, also transmitted by these fruit bats. Another example of a zoonotic emerging infectious diseases that affects public health is severe acute respiratory syndrome, coronavirus. Remember SARS? Have you heard of SARS virus? Causes a really bad respiratory disease infection. It occurred in 2003, and it was associated with palm civets, which is right here. So it was considered, palm civets were considered the reservoir of this virus that affected humans and caused this really bad pandemic involving the respiratory system. Later on, they figured out that it was actually bats. Bats had a naturally occurring coronavirus. They never showed symptoms. And the bats were actually transmitting the coronavirus to the palm civets. The palm civets were going into animal markets in China, and then the palm civets were actually transmitting by zoonotic transmission to humans, and then the humans, actually this virus was very scary because it was actually being transmitted human to human. So it's always very nerve-wracking when you're actually having a virus transmitting versus it stopping at the human. No, it went on to other humans. And so we had a really bad time with this. And you can see we had made the news. It was having lots of cases. We had at least 774 deaths. Involved 37 countries. It spread like wildfire around the globe. It involved, had about a 10% fatality rate. And then it kind of stopped after 2004 for whatever reason. But this is just another example of these emerging diseases that are originating in wildlife. Here's just a map showing some of the cases where the deaths occur and the incidence of cases that occurred around the country. Another one is Middle Eastern respiratory symptoms coronavirus, or MERS. Has very similar sound. Similar virus, but it was much more fatal. In this case, it's causing mortality rates of 42% worldwide, so a much higher percent of fatalities. This time, it was discovered that from bats, it was actually going across species transmission to involve camels, of all things. And so, of course, camels then eventually transmitted by zoonotic transmission to humans. And this emerged in 2012, and it actually made its way all the way to the United States in 2014. It's primarily associated with countries in the Arabian Peninsula, probably around camels, but again, mortality rate is quite high. So there's another example of a zoonotic disease. This shows the distribution of the MERS cases, most of them, again, occurring primarily on the Arabian Peninsula. And at the time frame from 2012 to 2014, and then 2015. So it's slowly, gradually making its way across the globe. Global trends, we know that there's an increased incidence of these emerging infectious diseases. They also are causing some major economic impacts, something you don't really think about. But if you're a small country, and if there's an outbreak, it can be a huge impact for their economy. For example, so here's a scale. This is the different years of the outbreaks, and this is the estimated cost in billions. And so you can see the relative amounts of money that were lost during these emerging infectious disease events. So here, there's Nipah right there. That cost that country so about $400 million. Meanwhile, SARS was costing at least $50 billion across the globe. So a lot of money associated with these emerging diseases, again, related to zoonotic infection. This is a paper that looked at emerging infectious diseases over the decades, and you can see that there's definitely an increasing trend over time. And they actually broke this down into ones associated with wildlife versus non-wildlife. And you can see in white that there's an increasing trend of those emerging infectious diseases over the decades associated with wildlife. So again, pretty scary stuff. This is showing the vector-borne diseases in white that are associated with these emerging infectious diseases. Very interesting paper. And they even went on to map out the hotspots of where these emerging infectious diseases are occurring, whether it's from wildlife, non-wildlife, or vector-borne pathogens. And you can see where those hotspots are. That one reference that I gave you, the health map, is basically the same idea. It's mapping out where those hotspots are real time, where they're occurring. And then what about these other ones? I just mentioned a few of these emerging infectious diseases. What about the other ones? Well, there's a whole bunch of them. You can see that are occurring across the globe. The ones in red are showing the newly emerging diseases. Nipah, I already mentioned, Hendra, SARS, but there's also things like E. coli, influenza. Those are also occurring across the globe. And then some actually come and resurge or reemerge after being dormant for a while. So they're also associated with emerging infectious diseases. Now, what about over the years? And this is just basically a timeline of what emerging infectious diseases have occurred over the years. You can almost see that it seems like every couple of years we get a new sort of a disease associated with a zoonotic pathogen. I talked about Nipah and SARS, MERS. What do you think is next? You mentioned it earlier.
Zika.
Zika. That's the one that we're dealing with right now. It was a virus that was isolated in Uganda. It was found in rhesus macaques. It was also found in mosquitoes from those rhesus macaques in 1947, way back when. All of a sudden, we're seeing it spread across the globe, all the way to Brazil in 2014. It's an arbovirus, yet another one. And you can see the distribution of some of the mosquitoes that transmit Zika virus in the United States. So Aedes aegypti mosquitoes are found sort of in the southeastern area, and then Aedes albopictus mosquitoes, which is pictured here, is found much more highly distributed even to the central United States. So those are the two mosquitoes that are able to transmit Zika virus. And it definitely have made their way to the United States. Of course, there's a lot of concern of Zika during the Olympics this last summer. How does Zika make it into the human population? Again, it's beginning with an animal, and a wild animal. In this case, it's a non-human primate versus the that I mentioned earlier. In this case, it's the non-human primate that had this in circulation between mosquitoes and other non-human primates in the forest. Occasionally, this infected mosquito might infect a human. Human goes into an urban transmission cycle with other mosquitoes and other humans, and lo and behold, we have an outbreak of Zika virus infection. So you no longer need that reservoir. It's able to transmit just fine between humans. And, of course, it has other consequences associated with birth, even causing microencephaly. So as of November 2nd, 2016, we can see now the distribution of Zika viruses that have made their way into the United States. You can see the numbers of cases. Most of them are associated with travel-related transmission. So they've been to another country, they come back to the States, and then they're diagnosed. So a large majority of those are actually traveler-related. In Florida, there has actually been locally transmitted Zika infections associated with mosquitoes in that state. So that's the ones that are scary, and trying to control that. I think I also included the website, from the One Health Day. Dr. Stephen Higgs talked about this extensively last Thursday, and that's available to you to have a look at if you're interested. And then I just looked, when I was looking this up, I noticed that actually now they've actually, as of the 8th of a couple of days ago, Florida voters have actually approved the use of mutant mosquitoes. So they're releasing male mutant mosquitoes that will basically, the idea is to try to kill off the female mosquito that actually feeds on humans. So males don't feed on human blood, but females do. And so the idea would be that the male mutant mosquitoes would kill off the female mosquitoes. So they've actually approved that. So hopefully we'll see some difference, because Florida is the one that's been the hardest hit. So what do you think some driving forces of emerging infectious diseases are? Climate change, population growth, globalization of food supplies, all of the above, A and B only. A, B, C, D, E. All right, the answer is D. What's that?
We were voting. We voted D.
Excellent, excellent. So there could be lots of driving forces that could cause those emerging infectious diseases to sort of be rushed out of nowhere. Changes in ecology is one thing, like changes in land use. If you're having deforestation, you're sort of encroaching into natural environments that have circulating mosquitoes and reservoir animals. Climate change, there can be changes in human demographics, for example. We have lots of people moving around constantly with travel or associated with things that are kind of beyond their control, like war or immigration. Changes in human behavior, like if they're outdoor recreation and if they're in those natural environments, there's a potential for them to develop this emerging infectious disease and spread it to the rest of the country, our communities. International travel, people are traveling constantly. You can get around the globe during an incubation of an infection without even being aware, and then locally transmitting the virus or infection to your community without you even knowing that at the time. Changes in technology and industry, so there's much more globalization of food supplies, so food is able to make its way across the globe and nothing flat. And so we sometimes don't know what's in those food supplies exactly. So that can spread emerging infectious diseases. Poor public health measures, if we don't have very good prevention programs like vaccines, that's also a nice driver of these emerging infectious diseases. So we don't have adequate vector control. Wow, that's a big one too, isn't it? So if you start looking at disease emergence, and consider wildlife, human, and domestic animal emerging infectious diseases, and then all the driving forces associated in interactions, it can be quite complex. So, the stars I have here regard the interactions that are occurring between those different entities, like wildlife and human, and domestic animal, and wildlife. So those are areas that are of particular interest to me. So how do we control these important disease outbreaks, do you think? If we have a disease outbreak, what do? I know we panic, and then what do? What's that? Contain it, and how do we do that? Maybe decrease travel, for example. Yeah, that's good. Yeah, decrease travel. What about diseases that we already know about? what are ways that we could try to prevent or control that disease from? Vaccinations, exactly. So those are some things that we have in our armament that we could try to control some of these diseases, especially if we've seen them before. We've had time to develop vaccines. We have them available. So we do have things like the National Veterinary Stockpile, the NVS, because we know how devastating these emerging diseases in animals can be devastating. Because we need it for our economy, we need it for our nutrition, and also they can be a source of zoonotic infection, as I've mentioned. So we do have a way to get some veterinary stockpile vaccines, for example, of some of the most important diseases to locations in the United States. This is a listing of some of the most important ones that we have vaccines for, because these are really impactful diseases to directly or indirectly to human health. On the human side, there's the strategic national stockpile. So we have available stockpiles for vaccines and any kind of emergencies like, terrorist attack, flu outbreak, earthquakes, that kind of thing. We have those ready to go when it's needed and serious enough. And then once everyone agrees that this is what is needed, then they will deliver these packages of vaccines and other first aid to those places so they can control that outbreak in this example. And so that's a very quick turnaround. The other one is if we don't have a vaccine available, there are ways to get some of these vaccines to be conditionally approved. So if they're in the works, because typically if you go through the conventional way of getting vaccines, it takes a long time. There's lots of steps, lots of regulations. But sometimes, things like Ebola, you remember, that was an emergency situation. We needed a vaccine quickly. So they developed ways to try to expedite product approval for, in the case of human vaccines, the FDA has ways to kind of move things along a little bit quicker. And maybe they might exempt them, but they exempt some of the regulatory requirements that might be required. And on the animal side, there's the USDA that will also provide exemptions to try to get these vaccines approved quickly, so it can have an effect. And that, again, was the case with FDA. They worked to try to expedite the development of vaccines for Ebola virus, which they did very successfully because there was an epidemic going on in West Africa last year. So other ways to try to control important emerging diseases. If you think about it, you have these animals, reservoirs, and so it's in circulation in the natural environment. Occasionally it will spill over into domestic animals. It might involve vectors. If it spills over to domestic animals and they amplify it, this infection, and then they spill over into human infection, and then humans also amplify it, then you've got this mess. You've got all these cases of infected animals and infected humans. So what can we do to try to control these emerging diseases? One way is to try to forecast or have early detection methods, maybe do samplings to see what's in circulation. If we can detect it earlier to get a quicker diagnosis, then we can get on it a lot quicker and start these control operations. And as you see, if you can do that, you can, with a rapid response and early detection, then you can have so much more benefit to both the animals as well as control benefits for the humans. Here's a previous graph that I showed you. See the red and the numbers of human infections. Here is if we could try to implement it a lot quicker, we would have a much better impact in decreasing the numbers of cases in both humans as well as animals. So those are some other ways that we could try to get at that. So, given what you know about One Health, what are ways to control or prevent these important diseases? What do you think? Or we're thinking about the animal. What do you think are some ways that we could try to think about these emerging infectious diseases? What is it about the animal that we could do to try to decrease the numbers of emerging infectious diseases from the animal standpoint? Some ideas that I thought of is maybe because we're kind of encroaching in wildlife areas and natural areas, we might want to limit the amount of interactions that we're having with animals, especially wildlife animals, because we know that they can harbor infectious diseases. So maybe limit the amount of interactions that are going on. Maybe control translocation of animals, decrease the amount of movement of wildlife animals, for example, or maybe limit the amount of interaction between domestic animals and wildlife animals as well, because sometimes that can also cause spread of emerging diseases. Or maybe survey the animals, maybe collect samples to see if there's anything that we need to know in those animals. Is there some unknown infectious disease that we don't even know about? Maybe we could do some surveillance to see what kind of diseases viruses or bacteria that they have in circulation that might be a threat to us. What about on the human side? What do you think we could do using our One Health knowledge to try to decrease or prevent these infectious diseases or diseases? What is it that we can do to try to decrease the impact?
Over here. Yeah, we have if you notice some sort of symptom or like a rash around some sort of vector bite, like a mosquito or a tick, then go to the doctor right away.
Right, so I agree. So awareness, just knowing that, hey, you know, I'm out in the wildlife, I might have been bit by a tick or a mosquito, I'm showing some symptoms, maybe I should get this checked out, because just being aware that, you know, there's things out there that we might not be have an immune response to because we've never been exposed, so we might be succumb to sort of infection. So increasing awareness, maybe decrease the encroachment in these natural environments. Maybe limit some of that. What about from the environmental standpoint? What do you think would be some ways that we could maybe prevent or control some of these diseases? Maybe we just need to limit access to these natural environments, or maybe control mosquitoes. We know that mosquitoes really like water. Maybe decrease the amount of standing water. Maybe that would be a really simple solution to try to decrease exposure to these emerging diseases. Maybe even surveying mosquitoes, you know, collecting mosquitoes, maybe doing a quick survey to see, is there any circulating bacteria or viruses that we need to know about? Is there any potential, maybe doing so pre-screen before it actually happens versus responding to it and trying to figure out what to do about it in the first place. So there are a couple of angles that we can think about One Health and emerging diseases and how we can try to control and or prevent them. And so as a veterinary scientist, you have the opportunity to look at these. You can look at pathogenesis of disease. You can look at transmission cycles of pathogens, whether or not they're vector-borne or not. You have these opportunities to look at these emerging diseases, especially because if you're a veterinarian and we know emerging infectious diseases are zoonotic in origin, you kind of have an inside scoop on what's going on with the animal side of things. So it provides you an opportunity to look at host pathogen interactions as well, and then also start thinking about contributing how humans factors contribute or environmental factors contribute as well. So you have a lot of opportunity to look at approaching these One Health types of problems as a veterinary scientist. So I think that's really great. I think we were able to answer most of these questions. If you have questions, here's my email address. This is my cat. This is Stewart number 2, named after Jimmy Stewart. So it's post-Halloween. And don't forget about the course that Martha mentioned regarding a One Health course. It's an online kind of a pre-college course that gets you used to taking doing an online course, because a lot of times you'll be doing that in college. And so, and it's on the topic of One Health, and so there'll be more topics like what we discussed and some projects associated with One Health topics associated with the course. Don't forget that the deadline to enroll is May 18th. I'm not sure if the website is up yet for registration, but eventually it will be. It'll be February.